You're listening to Beyond Bizarre True Crime, brought to you by AbJack Entertainment. Be sure to check out some of the other great true crime podcasts from this network, including The Murder in My Family, Missing Persons, DNA ID, Zodiac Speaking, Scene of the Crime, and 3 Men and a Mystery. All of these podcasts are available for you to binge on right now, wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe where you're listening to this podcast so you don't miss an episode.
Welcome to another episode of Beyond Bizarre True Crime. I'm your host, Eric Carter-Landin, and I host the show True Consequences, which is a true crime podcast with stories from New Mexico and the American Desert Southwest. In this episode, I will be talking about a case that is beyond bizarre. It's the case of Dylan Redwine. Dylan Nicholas Redwine was born on February 6th, 1999 in Denver, Colorado. And by all accounts, he was a hot-headed, funny, and talkative young man. He was said to be a gifted athlete who loved hanging out with his friends every day. Dylan's parents, Mark Redwine and Elaine Hatfield, married in 1991 and had 2 boys, Dylan as well as his older brother, Corey. Dylan and Corey were extremely close, and Corey was super protective of Dylan. The family moved to Durango/Bayfield, Colorado in the early 2000s. And for a while, things were going fine for the family. Dylan and Corey were settled into their schools, and Elaine and Mark both had really good jobs. Everyone seemed relatively happy. Then Elaine and Mark started having marital problems in 2005 and decided to separate from each other. They weren't quite divorced, but they really weren't together either. In 2008, they tried to give marriage another shot, but then there was an event that happened at a barbecue on the 4th of July in 2009, which ultimately led the couple to restart the divorce proceedings in the fall of 2009. This event was told 2 different ways depending on who you asked. Elaine and Corey claimed that Mark was having sexual relations with a family friend and that Corey caught Mark in the act. This led to an altercation between Elaine and Mark. Corey claimed that Mark pushed Elaine and this caused him to hit Mark. Mark denied the allegations of sexual relations and claimed that he was hit in the head from behind and that the blow knocked him out. The thing is, though, he claimed that he did not see his attacker, but he somehow knew it was Corey. Without us being present for the barbecue, it's impossible to know who is telling the truth. Mark did have a history of domestic violence and stalking, so I'm leaning towards Elaine and Corey's recollection of events. But this moment led the couple to decide to finalize their divorce, and this decision led to a protracted court battle between the 2 parties that lasted for years, and ultimately led to the tragic loss of a 13-year-old's life. In the fall of 2012, things were coming to a head for Mark and Elaine as they were preparing for a trial on a motion to relocate Dylan from Bayfield to Colorado Springs. It's important to note that both Mark and Elaine were given 50-50 custody at this time. Mark, however, had failed to execute his right to shared custody. He rarely saw Dylan, and he claimed that this was because he was traveling for work. But the thing is, Elaine also had to travel for her job. And what's worse, she didn't have any support in the Durango or Bayfield area. As a result, Dylan missed quite a few days of school in 2008 and 2009. To add insult to injury, despite buying everything Dylan needed, from food to clothing and basically anything else, Elaine was also paying child support to Mark, which makes absolutely no sense. Not only is Dylan living with her, but she is paying for everything. Elaine filed a motion to move Dylan to Colorado Springs so that she could be closer to her family. She needed help taking care of Dylan while she was traveling for work. Another really big reason that she wanted to move was because her mother was terminally ill. Mark was outraged that Elaine would try to move Dylan away from Bayfield. He claimed that Elaine and Corey were drug addicts and alcoholics. He tried to present himself to the court as a loving and caring father. His lawyer argued that he was very upset that Dylan missed so much school and claimed that Mark was unaware of what was happening, even though, as a parent, Mark could have checked the online parent portal or called the school to see how Dylan was doing. He did none of these things. The tension in the courtroom was palpable. The judge spoke with Dylan, and Dylan told him that he wanted to move to Colorado Springs because he liked his teachers better and he had many friends there. He never once mentioned anything about being uncomfortable around his father. This information would only surface after it was much too late to help Dylan. The judge granted Elaine's motion to move Dylan to Colorado Springs and also decided on a rotating holiday schedule for Dylan to spend time with both parents. Dylan was ordered to spend Thanksgiving with Mark in the Durango-Bayfield area. Dylan was adamant that he did not want to go. He told his mom prior to the visit over Thanksgiving that he wanted to stay there. He was so insistent that Elaine called her lawyer to ask what she could do and if she could get away with not sending him to his father. The lawyer let her know that there wasn't much she could do as it was a court order, and they had to obey the court. Dylan told everyone that was close to him that he had no interest in spending time with his father. Because this was a court order, though, there really wasn't much that could be done to prevent him from going to his father's home for Thanksgiving. So Mike Hall, Elaine's husband, told Dylan that he should try to make the most of the trip and spend as much time as possible with his friends while in Bayfield. On November 18, 2012, Dylan boarded a plane in Colorado Springs headed for the Durango airport. He arrived and his mom messaged him to make sure he made it safely. Dylan's response was yes, with a frowny face emoji. Mark picked up Dylan and took him to Walmart, where they shopped and purchased a movie that they could watch together. Dylan seemed to be putting as much distance as possible between himself and his father during that trip to Walmart. Video surveillance would show Dylan did everything he could to keep that distance. Meanwhile, Dylan was texting with his friend Ryan Nava to try to go to his house that evening. Mark told Dylan that he was not allowed to stay at Ryan's house for the night, so the pair made plans to meet up at 6 a.m. at Ryan's grandmother's home. In a text message exchange, Dylan told Ryan that he better be up or he's going to bother him all day long. Ryan assured him that he would wake up. And Ryan did wake up in time for Dylan to show up. But Dylan never showed. Not only that, but the last message that Dylan sent was to a friend named Amanda at 9:37 p.m. This would be the last time that anyone heard from Dylan Redwine ever again. You may be asking yourself, why was Dylan being so distant with his father? Why didn't he want to spend time with him? I think that there are several factors involved here. In 2011, Mark, Dylan, and Corey went on a road trip. Once, while Mark was out of the hotel room, Dylan was working on his dad's laptop and he stumbled onto some fetish photos of Mark. These included Mark in women's clothing, in diapers, and practicing coprophilia. These were shocking to Dylan and his reaction was visceral. The problem with this is that Dylan was only 12 years old. He was so young and likely had very little experience with any kind of sex, let alone fetish lifestyles. It was shocking to Dylan. And while he was uncovering these photos, Corey was on the phone with his then girlfriend. Dylan suddenly and urgently pulled Corey into the other room to show him the pictures. Corey, shocked by what he saw, pulled his cell phone out and took photos of those pictures with his cell phone, and the two discussed what they had just seen. To say they were disturbed is an understatement. It seems the pair didn't tell Mark what they found, but this did start to create a rift between the boys and their father. Meanwhile, the custody battle is happening and Mark is openly bad-mouthing Elaine and Corey to Dylan while on another road trip in the summer of 2012. During this trip, Dylan starts to bully text Corey asking him to send the photos of Mark so that Dylan can, quote, show Papa the kind of person he really is, end quote. Corey never sent those photos to Dylan because he was afraid that that would cause an escalating conflict between the father and son. So these issues, among others, I believe, were the contributing factors to Dylan's unwillingness to go see his dad. Then, the unthinkable happened. On the afternoon of November 19th, 2012, Elaine received a text message from Mark while she was at work. The text read, quote, Elaine, I am wondering if you have heard from Dylan. I've been trying to reach him all afternoon. End quote. As you can imagine, this sent Elaine into a tailspin. She started to panic and called her other son Corey as well as her husband Mike Hall. The three drove 7 hours from Colorado Springs to Bayfield. And here's the thing. Mark claimed that he had called the marshal's office to report Dylan missing, but when Elaine called to see what was going on and what was happening with the search for Dylan, they claimed they had never received any phone calls regarding Dylan's disappearance. Elaine, Corey, and Mike arrived at the Bayfield marshal's office after dark and immediately started looking for Dylan. Search and rescue teams were dispatched to the Redwine property, and one searcher noticed that at about 11 p.m., Mark turned off the lights to his home. Elaine, Corey, Mike, and the search and rescue teams worked in the dark until it was no longer safe to do so. And while Elaine and Corey and Mike Hall and other search and rescue members were screaming into the forest, calling out Dylan's name, hoping, beyond all hope, that they would find him, Mark Redwine, presumably, went to sleep. This search would drag on for months with search and rescue teams scouring the area surrounding Mark's home. There were even divers sent to Vallecito Lake to see if Dylan had accidentally drowned. Mark continued to claim that he was not involved in Dylan's disappearance, but his behavior was not how one would expect the father of a missing child to act. I know, everyone reacts differently to trauma, but stick with me on this for a minute. Number 1. Mark turned off all his lights the night that everyone was searching for Dylan. And I don't know about you, but if I lived in the middle of a forest where there are no street lamps and my kid was missing, I wouldn't turn off my lights. I would hope that the lights being on would allow my kid to see where I was and they would be able to find their way home. Number 2. Out of all the searches that happened over the years, Mark only participated in one search. Number 3. He did not attend any other events that were created to help find Dylan or to remember Dylan. Number 4. He was quick to blame everyone else, including and maybe especially Dylan's mom, Elaine. And when search and rescue teams asked Mark for anything that he had that had Dylan's scent on it, he told them he didn't have anything. In disbelief, the dog handlers again asked for something with Dylan's scent and pointed to a pillow that was on the couch where Dylan was allegedly sleeping the night before. Mark's response was, "Oh yeah, you can use that pillowcase." The pillowcase did not have Dylan's scent on it. As the search continued, law enforcement began to look at Mark as a suspect. They began interviewing him, asking him questions about the night Dylan disappeared. He tried to convince police that Dylan had wandered off and tried to walk to his friend Ryan's house, which was miles and miles away from Mark's home. The highway itself is steep at times, and it would be unlikely that Dylan would try to walk that far. Mark claimed that Dylan's fishing pole was missing and, again, created another story. He said that Dylan might have gone fishing. Cadaver dogs were sent to Mark's home and found the presence of human remains in several spots in Mark's house, as well as in his truck and on the clothing that he was wearing the night that Dylan went missing. Then, when luminol was sprayed in the home, there were several spots where blood was found. DNA testing would later show that one of the samples belonged to Dylan. Another sample was mixed with another subject's blood. Mark's explanation of this was that Dylan had a cold sore, and they were tossing a Nerf football back and forth, and Dylan was hit by the football in the mouth, which caused the wound to start to bleed. It wasn't until the snow melted that a hiker on Middle Mountain found bone pieces as well as some torn clothing that Dylan's remains were confirmed to have been found. But it would be several months before the rest of Dylan's remains were found, including Dylan's skull, which was located 1.5 miles from the original site where his partial remains were found. It took 5 years to bring this case to trial, but eventually, Mark was indicted for the murder of his son, Dylan Redwine. In the end, Mark was held accountable for his part in his son's death, even though he did everything he could to avoid accountability for killing his son. Now, it is impossible for me to capture the entirety of this beyond bizarre case in only one episode. So if you want to know more about Dylan's case, I do a 14-episode deep dive in Season 5 of True Consequences, Negligence, the Dylan Redwine story. Thanks again for joining me for this episode of Beyond Bizarre True Crime. I hope you listen to my show, True Consequences. You can find it wherever you listen to podcasts and on YouTube. Or you can go to trueconsequences.com and listen there. As we wrap up, I want to leave you with a short preview of my show, True Consequences, and be sure to check out the next episode of Beyond Bizarre True Crime, which will be hosted by Anna from the podcast Apple for the Teacher podcast. On November 18th, 2012, Dylan Redwine boarded a plane from Colorado Springs to Durango, Colorado. He had been dreading this trip for weeks, so much so that he asked his mom to not send him to visit his dad for Thanksgiving. Unfortunately, there was a court order requiring Dylan to go. No one dreamed what would happen on that fateful night in November in 2012.
I think it's important to keep it out there about, the last physical place that Dylan was supposed to be.
Bring Dylan home!
Just a question mark. He was the last person to see him, and he hasn't done his part in helping find Dylan.
Another ground search is in the works to find missing Colorado teenager Dylan Redwine.
The family of missing teen Dylan Redwine has been praying for a miracle.
My name is Eric Carter-Landin, the host and producer of True Consequences, and Season 5 is all about the Dylan Redwine case. There will be 14 episodes where I will deep dive into this case and uncover every detail regarding the disappearance and murder of 13-year-old Dylan Redwine. You can listen to True Consequences wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Thanks for listening, and stay safe, New Mexico.
Beyond Bizarre True Crime is produced by Mike Morford and Jess Betancourt for AbJack Entertainment, with music by Connor Betancourt. If you enjoy this podcast, make sure to subscribe wherever you are listening now, and please take a moment to rate and review the show. You can find Beyond Bizarre True Crime on social media. We're on Twitter and Instagram with the handle @BeyondBizarreTC. You can also find us on Facebook by searching for Beyond Bizarre True Crime Podcast. The views and opinions of the hosts and guests on Beyond Bizarre True Crime do not necessarily represent those of the show's creators, producers, or sponsors. Be sure to tune in on Saturdays for all new episodes of Beyond Bizarre True Crime.